Coming up on today's edition of Locked On Eagles, we've got 2 more days until the Eagles take on the Washington Commanders. Sunday at 1 o'clock, we're going to keep looking into that matchup and round 3 of LOE 3 right here on Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to a Friday edition of the show. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before, because BetOnline is where the game starts. And Gino, it's where today's episode starts too. Fridays, we do LOE 3, where we try to win our listeners 3 bets each with player props for each Eagles game this Sunday, 1 o'clock against Carson Wentz in the Washington Commanders. I feel like it's going to be an intense game, Gino. Even though it's in D.C., Eagles fans travel great. So I'm feeling a shootout coming, and we're going to probably make some offensive player props here coming up.
I would have to believe that. I think your tweet was spot on the other day that Carson Wentz, he's either going to go for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns, or he's going to throw 4 interceptions. There's
because
no
even he couldn't
ground.
deny how emotional this game's going to be, you know, and sometimes that's the greatest fuel or it's your worst enemy.
And the quarterback on the other side, the guy that doesn't buy into the rat poison,
Right,
doesn't take the cheese. I mean, in the best way, though, when he has
that wasn't an insult. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely does exactly what your quarterback should do as a leader of the franchise. And now we're sitting here just a few days removed, not just from a test against Carson Wentz, but for a chance to really take hold of this NFC East, get in front, get out to a 3-0 start for the first time, going back to Chip Kelly's last year in Philadelphia, or actually Doug Pederson's first year in Philadelphia, rather. And this is something that Nick Sirianni, he's talked about. They don't want to be behind the 8 ball where they're in a 2-5 hole going down the stretch. If you could get yourself out to an early start at 3-0 and set that standard, which seems to be what week 1 and week 2 really did, no better test than the NFC Beast. This is going to be a great game, man. And I mean, this is the most entertaining division in football. I will continue to say it just because of storylines, because of the games that we see on the field, and revenge games for that matter. This is another big name in Washington. Donovan McNabb was the first one. Then you have Deshaun Jackson. Now it's yet again another quarterback under different circumstances. But here we go again, Lou, and I'm excited to see where Jalen Hurts ends up at the end of this game, because he could be in consideration by all metrics to be a top 3 quarterback in this league.
Especially if he shows up, the former Eagles franchise quarterback, on the road to get to 3-0 with the 3rd straight strong passing performance. Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge opportunity for individuals that this game means more to. But as you said, it's the NFC East storyline too, because right now, you know, the Cowboys, I know they're 1-1 and they pulled that crazy win out with Cooper Rush against the Bengals, and you got the 2-0 Giants. Those 2 teams play on Monday night this week. But personally, if Dak Prescott is going to be out for a long time, I still think this Commanders team, as hot and cold as they are the biggest competition for the Eagles. So if you can get a win against them, put them down to 1-2, you're 2 games ahead of them already in this race. That's going to be super important. So we're going to cover the game more in segment 2 and 3. But Gino, as we do every Friday, we like to start things off with some betting, courtesy of our official sportsbook at betonline.net. We make 3 player props each throughout the season. And taking a look at what we did before we get into these bets that you see on the screen for our YouTube listeners, we are currently, Gino's 3-3 on the season. I'm 2-4, trying to get back. And Gino, I think this is going to be the week that we really, I like the 6 bets that we have total here. I think this is going to be a big week for us.
I feel that the NFC East, we have the best grasp on when it comes to the whole landscape. You don't see Detroit 2 times a year. You don't see Minnesota 2 times a year. We don't do endless conversations in the summer with our friends from Lockdown NFC North. No, it's all these guys from the NFC East. And
it's also hard
I think
to
we have a good understanding.
Season, man. Things are weird too.
It is. Yeah. It is. And I think you're starting to see the identity of teams grow. I think with Washington right now, it comes down to stopping that passing attack, getting after their rush attack, which has been towards the bottom of the league. They're 28th currently in DVOA with the rush. And then their defense has not been what it was 2 years ago. They're still trying to get healthy. They'll be without Chase Young. They'll be light on the defensive line. This is an offensive performance that I'm going to look back on and say, you should have performed. And when they do perform, I'll say, yeah, that makes a total lot of sense, because the matchups that you're going to be playing in, I think they favor the Eagles, especially when you're talking about offense versus defense.
And taking a look at our bets here, so we have a lot of overs on receiving yards and passing yards. So I think we both expect this game to be pretty productive for both teams through the air. For you, you have the first one's interesting. A Kenny Gainwell bet. We have 3 running back bets here for the Eagles.
Kenny Gainwell over 11.5 receiving yards. I think it's clear that they're going to try and continue to utilize him in the pass game. It was some designed looks on the outside a few times, plus with his ability to get in open space as a check down. 11.5 yards, I think that number is way too low for a guy like Kenny, who is the main receiving back.
You can pull that off in one catch, honestly.
That's one check down from Hurts when they run 4 verts. And I think that Kenny is just going to continue to get better. He has to continue to solidify his ball security. So after that interception that he caused last week, you would hope that he gets back into the pass game. And they wanted to set up the screen game with him last week on that pass that got intercepted. And with the way that the offensive line is playing, man, they're going to get to the second level and open things up for these receivers, in my opinion.
My first over for receiving yards with this LOE 3 this week is DeVonta Smith to have over 65 receiving yards plus 156 odds, 7 catches last week for 80 yards. Gino, you look at how the Eagles used Smith last week, a lot of snaps inside. And when you look at Washington, the 2 teams they played the first 2 weeks of the season, they played against Jacksonville and Detroit. Who were the 2 receivers that tore them up? It was guys that play a lot inside, Christian Kirk and Amon-Ra St. Brown. DeVonta Smith is already a star receiver that can win anywhere. And I know Quez Watkins is going to play inside a lot. So is A.J. Brown. It's kind of slot by committee for the Eagles this year. But if they're going to use Smith like they did last week in that kind of role, I think he's going to hammer over 65 receiving yards.
And I could see that going both ways. I could see A.J. Brown having a similar number 2 lining up in the slot as well.
Or
because
Quez.
you want to take advantage of that matchup. And you look at how, non-efficient that they've been against those guys. I think the comparison to Amon-Ra St. Brown for DeVonta Smith, outside of the size, of course, Amon-Ra is a little more rocked up top. But, excuse me, when you look at their game, you look at how they utilize two-way goes. You look at how they utilize those intermediate to 15-yard areas. And DeVonta Smith, he's only going to continue to get better as the season goes along. You're not going to be able to game plan for all of the weapons that the Eagles have, because before you know it, Lou, you forget about Quez Watkins in the deep third, and he has a 56-yard touchdown over your head.
And then, Gino, you're riding with tight end 1, Dallas Goedert, over 46.5 receiving yards.
He has been, by a long stretch, Lou, according to Football Outsiders, the most effective tight end in football. He currently has a plus 70% DVOA, which is just astronomical right now.
Too, Gino. Yards after the catch this season for all weapons, receivers, running backs, and tight ends. Number 1, Austin Eckler. Number 2, Jalen Waddle. Number 3, Tyreek Hill. Number 4, Dallas Goedert. Wow. He also ranks number 1 in the NFL among tight ends with yards per catch and 3rd in receiving yards. This guy is going off this year.
And if you look at what Hawkinson did last week for Detroit, they set him up pretty good. He had a pretty effective game. I think you could take that similar path with Dallas Goedert. And even when he is going against some of the better safeties, last week he's playing against a guy like Harrison Smith, he's still able to put up a bunch of yards. And you look at Dallas Goedert's production, you look at his yards per reception, he's averaging 14, 15 yards reception. You need 3 catches from him to hit that number, Lou. I think they're going to continue to feed him.
He's averaging like 18 yards a catch.
It won't be what Zach Ertz was, where you're seeing 8 to 10, but I think 4 to 6 targets a game for Dallas Goedert is the bare minimum. And riding with the numbers, riding with his average yards per reception, I believe that's a good bet all day long, because with the middle of the field being utilized from Jalen Hurts the way it has been the first 2 games, he's one of the key targets in that area.
And then, Gino, because we're hitting so many overs here with passing statistics, I have Jalen Hurts surpassing 240 passing yards, but also it's going to be a 2-leg parlay. I think Carson Wentz in Washington, not that they're going to dominate this Eagles secondary that looks like the best in football right now, but him and Hurts together are both top 6, top 5 overall in passing yards this year and overall offense. And they have 3 really good weapons. I think the Eagles are still going to win this game, but I think Wentz, he's probably going to throw a crazy, ridiculous interception and have a couple insane sacks that he takes or a fumble. It's going to happen with Carson, but he's putting up yardage this year too. So I like that parlay to have both of them in a fun. That'd be a great storyline if those two get in a shootout. I have both of them getting over 240 passing yards each, which is at plus 250 right now on BetOnline.
I like Hurts to surpass that number all day long, man, in the air. I really believe that these weapons are going to go crazy. And
especially if all these guys are getting the overs that we bet here.
Yeah, and the thing with Wentz is he has the most efficient receiver in football currently with Jahan Dotson. But the thing is, the Eagles are also in the top 2 for DVOA for defending the number 1
for
receiver.
Sure. Yeah.
So I believe Wentz should cover that number. And if he does, if the Eagles go up big, man, like you're going to live in territory of Carson
Wentz. And again,
Wentz stacking
240
up garbage time yards.
Right. 240 doesn't mean Carson Wentz had a great game. It doesn't mean they won. I just think overall at the end of this game, both of them are going to surpass 240 like they have throughout the season. And then we both, to finish off LOE 3, Gino, we both have Miles Sanders bets. So I have him, it's in a parlay here, another 2-leg parlay, over 70 rushing yards, and then the Eagles win. And you have the over on Sanders at 63.5 rushing yards. I think considering he had almost 100 week 1, he had 80 week 2, he's averaging 7.4 yards a pop week 1, 4.7 last week. I think, and that's even with not even a lot of volume. I like both of those bets.
And Washington's run defense, man, is very, very, very bad.
DeAndre Swift tore them up last week. Yeah.
He absolutely decimated them. I'm not saying the Eagles' run defense is much better, but when you look at the numbers that running backs have been able to put up, there's no shock that Washington is currently sitting at 31 in terms of rush defense DVOA out of 32 teams. And the 32nd team, Lou, is the Minnesota Vikings. But the Eagles are they're 30, but Washington, I believe that Miles Sanders, who's been one of the most efficient runners in football, as opposed to Antonio Gibson, who's been one of the least effective runners in football. The way Miles has been just hitting the hole, the way he's been able to churn his legs and get yards after contact, I think that might be the biggest progression for who Miles Sanders is as a player. Because when you looked at who he was coming out of college, didn't have much tread on the tires. He was more of that quote-unquote scat back type of player behind Saquon Barkley, only started to evolve in between the tackles when he got to Philadelphia. And now you're seeing that maturity pay off where he's not going down at first contact much, Lou. And if he does, he's either going to spin out of it, he's either going to keep moving his legs and get more yards. And the Eagles, the way they've been able to close out games with the rush the last couple weeks, Lou, where they pick up those first downs late in games, it's on the back of Miles Sanders. They'll spread in Kenny Gainwell, they'll spread in Boston Scott. But with as efficient as Miles Sanders has been, as healthy as he might have ever been in his time in Philadelphia, you're seeing all of that come to fruition, and he is exactly who we wanted him to be in his contract year.
Ever since he came back from the injury last year, he's been a completely different running back. Listen to his yards per carry since then in 7 starts. 5.9, 7.1, 5 even, 7.3, 6.4, 7.4, 4.7. Miles Sanders looks like a different runner over the last year and a half. Exciting to see what he can do against, as you mentioned, the 31st ranked rushing defense in Washington. We'll continue to get into this matchup, guys, coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. And today's show is sponsored by Brightco. Brightco engagements are a big deal. Gino knows this. He's getting married this year. Guys always want to get it right with the right ring, but also the right place to do it. My best friend got engaged at our lake house a couple years ago that we go to every summer. My brother got engaged in the mountains of Sedona in Arizona. While many can get ambitious with the setting, it does come with more risks towards that ring. Imagine if my friend dropped the ring in a 400-foot deep lake, or if my brother dropped the ring down a giant mountain. If you don't want to be that guy, of course, take extra precaution, but let's say you are. Our friends at Brightco will get you a replacement for the full value of your last ring, no matter if it's lost, stolen, or you just don't know what happened to it. Please don't be that guy, though. Go to brightco.com, bright.co, /lockdown. It's the fastest, easiest, and cheapest way to cover yourself. These guys at Brightco are geniuses. They made covering your ring, watch, or whatever so easy you can get covered in 2 minutes over the phone. You won't find a better deal on great coverage that is super affordable. Go to bright.co /lockdown. All right, Eagles fans, today's episode of Locked On Eagles is the last one until week 3. The Eagles take on the Washington Commanders on Sunday at 1 o'clock. Gino, they're wearing green on white, which last year they were 1-3 on the road wearing green. Oh. So there's your jersey stat. But here's a better jersey stat for you. They're 4-1 in their last 5 games against Washington wearing green on white.
Where the hell do you find this out? You're unbelievable.
I literally just, each week I am determined to come up with a very unique jersey stat every Friday on the show. So you got that now for you to look forward to. But some more exciting stats, to get into for this matchup. We talked about it on Tuesday's show. A lot of the storylines this week, because it's Commanders week, very centric around Carson Wentz, of course, obviously going to happen. But Jalen Hurts is becoming the guy that we thought we lost in Carson. We saw in 2017. We talked about how we laid out all these checks for him to, this list for him to check off, right? Mm-hmm. And there's so many things that we talked about, right? Throwing outside the pocket, keeping his eyes downfield, staying inside a clean pocket, throwing in tight windows, utilizing the entire field, being efficient in volume. We said that he's really done all of that in 2 weeks. And it looks like the numbers are backing it up. 2 of those areas we talked about when it comes to throwing on the run, scrambling, unlike last year where a lot of the time he dropped his eyes and he tucked it. This year, only Patrick Mahomes is a more efficient passer outside the numbers than Jalen Hurts. And then I got this stat from our good friend Jeff Kerr at CBS. He was utilizing the left side in the middle way more than he did last year. Hurts is second in the NFL in passing attempts to his left side, and he's first in yards per attempt on passes over the middle. Those are exciting numbers because, again, they're in areas that we really wanted to see him improve, and he's at the top of the league right now doing it. It's only 2 weeks, but that's an exciting evolution.
The cliche goes, you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And if you look at a quarterback in terms of a franchise quarterback and how they evolve, that's exactly one of the areas. And you look at Josh Allen, right? What was his big thing? His completion percentage coming out of college. Oh, you can't improve completion percentage. Right. You can't improve accuracy. Well, we have seen this moniker, this paradigm shift of quarterbacks over the last couple of years. You look at Patrick Mahomes, somebody who had a similar type of coming out of college where he didn't have that full repertoire, but he had the skill set. Jalen Hurts might not be that guy where you look and say, okay, are his traits elite by every measure? No. I mean, his arm strength, I'd say, it looks great right now. He had the longest completed air distance pass, according to Next Gen Stats, in week 2 last week on his touchdown to Quez Watkins. And he has become comfortable in those areas where you saw how he just hesitated going to his left. He would hesitate looking over the middle. It was always, okay, first look to the right, first read. I'm going to see him. If not, I'm going to pull it and go, especially his rookie year. But now you're seeing a more complete, evolved passer. And you look at it in terms of, let's say, Pokemon, like he's in, I would say, like right on the edge of that third evolution. Like you got Charmeleon, Charizard, and like Charmander right under him. Like Charizard is that next evolution for him, in my opinion. He is right there. And the next step for me, Lou, is maintaining the consistency.
I totally agree.
Yes, it's great to show it in the first 2 weeks, but another moniker, another old cliche, flashes will get you fired. I know I've mentioned it on this show where flashes of greatness will end up biting you in the rear end when it comes to,
because there's a lot of Eagles quarterbacks that have flashed, Gino. That's kind of been the name of the game for a decade, is you get some great quarterback play, but it has never really lasted. That goes for Carson Wentz, Nick Foles, and Michael Vick. The list goes on and on. You only got a couple of years at most out of each of those guys. Totally agree. Consistency is the way to go, but it's really a testament again to his work ethic and self-awareness, Gino. I defend Carson Wentz for a lot of things, and I think it's justified. But one thing that's also justified is a criticism of him being stubborn and really not changing a lot of his weaknesses. Even at times when he was with the Eagles at press conferences, he says, I'm not going to change the way I am. And of course, to a degree, yeah, you don't want a guy at that point to totally change. It's part of what made him great. But there's things about Wentz that we're still saying in 2022 that he needed to correct.
Still throws high.
Still throws the ball high. Still does not have a great feel for pressure in the pocket, when to get rid of the ball. Has it been heightened by the circumstances? Sure. But Jalen Hurts, there's been a lot of things that he could have used circumstances as an excuse for. And instead, this offseason, he improved on everything that honestly I doubted that he could improve on. That doesn't, again, like you said, though, it doesn't mean he's the guy. Eagles fans know to proceed with caution with this, but it's been a great 2-week trajectory.
And the thing is, and what we talked about is the consistency of it. And what we have seen, Lou, I believe since that stretch after they were 2-5 last year, is a more mature, a more consistent, and a more evolved player all around. Because
and
when
even
you
talk
talk
a
about
step back too for that Jets game, and when you watch Minshew, Gino, I felt like even that heightened things more.
Definitely. And he's not the guy that goes into a situation. And I know there was the article that came out today from Tim McManus from ESPN talking about the relationship between Wentz and Hurts, even going back to that, where he's in this tumultuous relationship. He never let it, just hinder his growth at all. He could have been there and been in that situation and bit all the rat poison and ate the cheese and pointed fingers here and there. He's never been that guy. And he's one player that when the season ends and you say, what happened off the field, what happened Monday through Saturday, I don't think he will ever be the problem for you. Where when you go back to Carson, that was a big thing. Like Monday through Saturday, when you're hearing these reports of just his continued lack of presence in the pocket, his continued height on his balls that are just going over receivers' heads that lead to interceptions. It is, and
especially when you know a guy's got the talent and they don't put it together. And the great thing that's impressive about Hurts is like he's got, some guys can get away with certain flaws. Jalen has to do that.
He's corrected them. He's gotten better at all of them, man. And it
makes it tough to defend him. How is
to not defend him, right?
It's hard to think of what's the blueprint now in defending Jalen. I thought about this today. Detroit goes blitz heavy. They're trying to rush his clock. That didn't work. Then Minnesota tries to just keep him in front of him, dare him to throw in the pocket. That didn't work. Gino, it'll be interesting to see how Washington goes about this versus what we've seen the first 2 weeks. He's that multi-dimension, the ability to run and pass. I mean, you see why teams in the NFL covet that so much.
I think we could go back to his rookie season and really go off the point of what you just said. Like, how do you defend this guy? It's not the excuse of the first year of Colin Kaepernick, where it's like, how do you defend him? Teams didn't know what to do. When Jalen got to Philly towards the end, when he started that Saints game, they didn't know what to do. Arizona didn't know what to do. And even now, where he is a more evolved player, teams are still asking that same question that they never figured him out, quote unquote. You think you might have, but he has done things at a more effective rate where, you might know that he's going to escape the pocket at times, but he does it in a way where it's effective, it's efficient, and even if you game plan to defend him, he's a better athlete than 95% of the people on the field. And when that all comes together, something that you, Lou, personally love from a quarterback, when the athleticism is just way better, that's something that happens in high school and college where you put your best athlete at the position. Well, all of a sudden, this guy's evolving into a player like those top guys that can pass. If you're seeing 300-plus yard outputs game after game after game, what's the next step? 400 yards. What's the next step after that? 3-4 touchdown passes. And we've doubted him on some areas, Lou, but he's proved us wrong. What's to say he can't get to that next step? And that's where I'm waiting to see. Just let that consistency just keep its head, keep doing what is working, and allow the cohesion between all of those people in that offensive building to remain the way it is, because whatever is working now, this is the recipe. This is the chef's kiss, Lou. Even last week in Minnesota, where that second half might not have gone the way you had thought, you just think about what happens when they play 4 complete quarters of football on offense. That's the 35 plus
limit.
40-point outings that we've been talking about for 3-4 years now. And to have this conversation, it makes me super happy. I mean, you always say you want to be wrong about this guy. You want to be told and eat
People
all
don't
this
believe
crow.
me, but I love having this talk that he's proving me wrong. I don't want to be right more than have the Eagles be good. I mean, that's
100%. We ride for the logo, brother. Always.
Absolutely. It's always the logo. It's always the midnight green. Gino, we'll take one last look at Eagles Commanders before Sunday's game coming up next. First, tell us about our good friends that this week, I promise, are going to win us some money with LOE3 at Bet Online.
I'll say this. Betting is a marathon. It's not a sprint.
That's right.
Always do it responsibly. Lou and I, we're doing it within the money that we get here from Locked On Eagles due to our great fans. But we're playing within our units. We're playing the games that we love. We're focused on our Eagles. And there's only one place to do it, betonline.net. Man, that is sharp for our YouTube watchers right now.
It's great.
I want one of those.
I know. I would love that right on my desk.
But we're only a few short weeks away from the NBA coming back. The MLB playoffs is going to be here sooner than you know it. The NHL preseason is kicking off. Soccer's going on. We're going to have a Winter World Cup. We're going to be able to sit back during Christmas break and bet on soccer. But right now it's football season. There's games on tonight for college. There's games on tomorrow for college. There's NFL on Sunday, NFL on Monday. Soon enough, Maction will be back, and we'll have football every day of the week. There's only one place that we do it here at the Locked On Eagles podcast and the entire Locked On Podcast Network. It's the official sportsbook of everybody here. Lou and I love it. We take our phones. We go to betonline.net. We enter all our props. We enter all our game bets.
Yep.
Anything that you can imagine, folks, is on there. I had to shoot Lou today to send him to the right area to get all these props because there's so many.
World.
He got lost in the vast variety of props that betonline.net has. I guarantee you will find some fun. You'll have some fun, and BetOnline it's where the game starts. We're always betting there, so go check them out today.
All right, Eagles fans, we're wrapping up week 3 of Locked On Eagles during the 2022 regular season. We got the Commanders in D.C. on Sunday. The Eagles are at 2-0. Washington's at 1-1. This is a great game as both teams try to continue to gain ground in the NFC East. I almost said NFC least. You said beast earlier, Gino. It looks like a much better division, even with Dak Prescott out. Cowboys are at 1-1 with a big game against the Giants on Monday night. New York's 2-0. I don't think that's going to last. I think the two best teams in the division right now are in this game, and it's going to be a fun one. I think both teams on paper look exciting. I think the Eagles are clearly the better team, the more consistent team. A lot of that has to do with their quarterback. But, Gino, also, you look at this game is loaded with weapons. Part of why I hit the over with Hurts and Wentz on passing yards is look at both sides, the trios they have. And we saw with the Eagles, the group of, the whole offense is loaded, right? We saw A.J. Brown get his last week. DeVonta Smith. Quez Watkins gets his big touchdown. Dallas Goddard dominates. Miles Sanders. Washington, though, I can't wait for this battle between Bradbury, Slay, and Maddox versus McLaurin, Dotson, and Samuel. It's going to be an exciting battle on both sides.
To your point that Washington hasn't been great defending that slot receiver. This is from Football Outsiders. It's the DVOA for the first, second, and any other receiver. Defending first receivers, they're 5th in the league currently, taking away the number 1. So let's say A.J. Brown, he only has a 40-yard game. Well, they're 21st defending the second receiver. So DeVonta Smith and Quez Watkins should have a better chance.
Yep.
They're 30th defending any other wide receiver. So if you're going to game plan, man.
So I should have took the Zach Pascal bet is what you're saying.
I was going to say Pascal might be in for a 4 or 5 reception game this week, and I wouldn't be shocked. But the weapons, Lou, I think in the NFC are at an all-time high. I want to ask you this question.
Yeah.
Outside of Mike McCarthy, the best group of coaches in the NFC East since when?
It's been a long time. I don't know. Is it like when Reed and Coughlin were there? And
yeah, you got to go Reed, Coughlin.
I guess
you
Jason
probably
Garrett,
have to go Shanahan.
Shanahan. It was probably like the early 2010s. Yeah, it's been a while since it's been looking this good. Even the Giants, they should not be.
Daboll's got it right, man.
And I don't think Daniel Jones is the guy, and they got a lot of work when it comes to their roster, but Daboll's the guy at head coach.
And I think Rivera is a perfect person to be in Washington
Great
as
coach,
well.
yeah.
I just think with everything that's still going on with Daniel.
Yeah, he's a calm
Snyder
presence in
there,
a disruptive, chaotic organization.
Yeah, and if you're going to send Carson Wentz anywhere, do it to a guy that, I mean, he has been through.
Sure.
I mean, Cam Newton
Good
was
point.
his quarterback, so I mean, he can handle anybody at that position, really. And I mean, you eliminate Mike McCarthy. This is a pretty stacked division when it comes to coaches. And I mean, looking at the landscape of both of the Eastern divisions, Lou, the AFC East is good. The NFC East is good. There's some great football on the Eastern time zone right now.
Yeah.
And it's good to see competitive ball back, because when you're going down the stretch and teams are 4-8 and 4-9, and the whole division only has 20 wins at the end of the year, it's not great. The best is when you're competing against Dallas and the Giants and Washington in the final weeks of the season, when multiple teams are getting to double-digit wins.
Yeah, not everybody's saying you only won the division because your division stinks.
Exactly.
That's always the worst. That's what it felt like in 2018. It's what it felt like in 2019, as much as we enjoyed those runs. It's nice to have a more quality division from top to bottom.
And it sets you up well for the rest of the conference, because if you win this game as well, you're starting out 3-0 against the NFC. You beat 2 NFC North teams. You could potentially beat another NFC East team. Then you got to figure out what's going on in the West, and you might be playing the best team in the West, the best team in the North, and you have a chance to potentially take on the best team in the South. If the Saints figure things out, they can make a run there as well. So,
and dare I say, these 3 games, if you win all 3 of these, you know, none of them I think are Super Bowl contenders when you talk about Detroit, Minnesota, or Washington, but I'd say it's your best wins in 2 years when it comes to from top to bottom. I think that's the best run you've been on.
It's like in the UFC, when you're on the way to contend for a title and you have to fight like the number 4 or 5 guy in your division to get that next step.
The guys that people thought were the Eagles were in this tier.
Yeah,
and I think if they beat Washington too, you can tell, okay, they don't belong with these teams anymore. They're at the next step.
And then the next test is when the season continues to go on, and you're playing those better teams. You're playing the Green Bays. You're playing the Arizonas of the world. You'll get Dak Prescott back probably for that second Dallas.
That'll be exciting. Yeah.
That's when the test starts. But you don't want to go in the test without studying. You want to make sure you have it all memorized. You already took your pre-SATs. You took your LSATs. You took whatever pre-test, and that's what these games are. These are those warm-up fights. It's like in college right now, where they're finally getting into conference play, but the first 3 weeks you play out of conference. Well, they didn't have that luxury. You're taking on opponents that could decide your fate. Come if you are in a wild card spot. Come if you're fighting for a division, and maybe even for a playoff spot or a playoff win. So these games, I don't take lightly at all. I think even next week going against the Jaguars will be a good test. All
Doug
of these
Pederson,
games
it's back-to-back revenge weeks.
3 in a row. What do you mean, Jalen Rager? You can't forget about that revenge game all time.
It's been the month of revenge, and let's see the Eagles run the table with all of them.
That would be great, man.
And Zach Ertz comes to town later this year. We got a lot of former guys coming back. Yeah,
but
it'll be
one
super
thing
exciting.
about the Eagles is that they handle their business regardless of who
they're 4-1 in revenge games, Gino. When you talk about the most notable ones in the 21st century,
Deshaun's the only loss, right?
So they beat in their first game back. They beat McNabb. No, McNabb's the only loss. They beat Dawkins. They beat Djax. They beat LaShawn McCoy. And they lost to McNabb. So they're 4-1 in the games that and T.O. They beat T.O. his first time back with Dallas. So we'll see what happens, man. We got Wentz Sunday, Doug next week, Ertz later on. We got you covered, though, all throughout the season right here on Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day on all podcast platforms, on YouTube as well, and on Twitter at Locked On Birds, at GC24_football, and at DiBiase LOE. Make sure your second listen is the Peacock and Williamson NFL show. Brian Peacock and our former NFL scout, Matt Williamson, they give you the expert NFL analysis in less than 30 minutes. Free and available wherever you get your shows. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. As always, thank you for downloading Locked On Eagles. Thank you for watching and listening. And let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles.